Welcome to the next episode of the Default Profitable Podcast. You're listening as we talk to business owners in the 317 area code about how to start and run a business. I'm your host, Matt Nettleton, and today my guest is Tom Britt. Tom, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to share my story.
No problem. So, we've talked briefly, 5 minutes before we started to hit record, but why don't you take 2 or 3 minutes, introduce yourself and then your company to the people who are listening.
Sure. I'm Tom Britt. I'm the president and CEO of the Townpost Network. Lifelong Hoosier, lifelong entrepreneur. I've had over 30 years in publishing. Got into the .com space in the mid 1995 era, and Townpost has evolved out of that. It's kind of a culmination of all my background in publishing and my .com and internet experience. And we started Townpost in 2004. That's when we started our first magazine here at Geist Reservoir called the @Geist Community Newsletter, which evolved into the Geist magazine. That magazine started it all for us. We now have 19 franchised magazines around Indiana and Northern Kentucky. And I like to tell people that our business model is we just like to make communities feel smaller. We want people to feel like they know the businesses down the street. They know about the new restaurants. They know about events coming up. And we like to utilize our magazines, which are printed and mailed out to over 250,000 mailboxes in 19 areas. We use our social media. And we've also leaned it real heavy into digital marketing and digital advertising for our customers, which are small businesses that support our magazines. So that's kind of our business model, and that's how I ended up here in Fishers.
So how long have you lived in Fishers?
I've lived in Fishers proper for, this will be 9 years this month. I actually moved into Fishers. I lived on the south side of Geist for about 20 years. So I've lived in this Fishers, Geist, unannexed, annexed areas for about almost 30 years.
I only asked because I moved to Fishers in 92, and there was still an Amoco gas station at the corner of 116th and Allisonville. So
yeah, Amoco there, and it was a Shell station over by 69, and in between it was Fritz's, and that was about it.
That was about it. So I try to figure out how long people have been around by what they remember from that. So
yeah, do they remember the McDonald's before it was renovated or after it was renovated?
Yes.
That's kind of the benchmark of how long they've been in Fishers.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about why you started the business. What was it that made you take the leap and do the Geist magazine, I guess is really where it started.
Yeah. So, I had a publishing background. I was doing magazine publishing. I started my first publishing business in 93 out of my garage. And in the mid 90s, this thing called the internet was coming around, and all the talk was about how internet was going to do away with print, that print would just go away. People were just going to read everything on the internet. And so I looked at that as an opportunity to start building websites, and I ended up doing a .com startup called channelseek.com. And channelseek was really a database. We call it the TV guide of the internet. So we would database streaming audio and streaming video shows being broadcast on demand or live. And we put those into a guide format, and we pushed it out through partners like AOL Time Warner, Comcast, Sprint Broadband, even Cello in Europe. And what the talk was back in the late 90s when I started my .com, and I still had my publishing company across the hall, was all about convergence. People were trying to figure out what was going to happen when the internet converged television, radio, and internet. What was going to happen when all three of those kind of converged? And here I was, the guy with a publishing company, and print was never brought into the conversation. And what I saw in the late 90s and about 2000 was that there really was a place for print. And I felt like if you could kind of localize print into a community with internet and television and radio, which has now evolved into podcasts and streaming video and websites and apps, if you could do all that locally, that you could make a business model work and that people would be drawn to and really want to be vested in their local community. And so that's why I launched it in 2004, was just it was really an experiment. I just thought, well, let's try it. I was consulting for a couple companies. I'd sold my .com and my publishing company in 2000. And I invested in a couple, like a web company, and I'd done a direct mail company I owned part of. But I was really just doing this as a side hustle, as just an experiment, a little lab at Geist Reservoir. And I mailed out my first copy in April of 2004. It was just black and white. It's still hanging on my wall here in my office. And I always say the rest is history. Once I put that content out there, I had local stuff that nobody else had. I was mailing it into mailboxes. I had a website at atgeist.com. That was our original website domain. And, it's kind of just took off. I mean, I had people calling me. I had people saying, hey, I saw so-and-so in here. Can I advertise too? And so that model, I just kept trying to perfect it and try to get better at it and try to see how I could get better content. And obviously the advertising follows. So when I had more revenue, I could expand the page count, expand my distribution. The model initially was just to prove the model, which I proved. But the second piece of it, well, now how can I expand it? How can I grow? And that's where we came up with the franchising model. And that's kind of how we really started adding gas to this, is by franchising the concept and just providing all that infrastructure and knowledge and learning that we've accumulated over the last 20 years. So
you really started your first business in 93.
Correct.
So you had to be like in 7th grade at that point.
Not quite. And I didn't start that, like, I didn't go to college and then graduate and then walk and open my business the next week. I mean, it was a long process to get to that. I started my company actually out of my garage in 87. Believe it or not, I started doing a magazine. I talked to my employer into let me do a magazine on the side because we didn't have the staff to do everything. And it was a side hustle out of my garage. And then, one thing led to another. I just worked really hard and tried to learn as much as I could from everybody I was around and people that I worked for and worked with. And finally, it was January 3rd of 93, our company, Weimer, had just been purchased by Shepard Poorman, which was a printing company on the northwest side of town. They actually had been the printer of the publishing company I'd been working for. And when they bought Weimer, that's the day I turned in my keys and walked into an office for the first time as my own employee.
So a 6-year evolution from side hustle to full-time gig. And then the evolution, because probably at that point there was still not, and you brought this up earlier, but typesetting, there was probably still
Mm-hmm.
physical printing presses in 93.
Mm-hmm.
And people doing actual printing before that was just word processing. I mean, you've navigated a lot of changes. I guess my
Mm-hmm.
first question is, do you have a passion for the business, or do you see a business opportunity? Kind of which end of that spectrum are you on?
I would say it's mostly I had a passion for it. I really enjoy print. I enjoy the magazine industry. My first job out of college was working on magazines at Weimer Typesetting on the second shift. And so I've just always been around magazines and publications. So that I really liked that. But what I really enjoy about the industry is how to disrupt it and how to leverage digital and how to leverage YouTube and how to leverage desktop publishing, even back in the early 90s. How to leverage these new technologies, these new ways of doing things to make this industry better. And so I still look at magazine publishing and publishing. Now I look at it much broader than I did back in 93. I look at publishing as, podcast is publishing content. AI is publishing content. Nobody likes it, but it is.
Very mediocre, but it's very consistent.
But look at YouTube when it started back in 04. I mean, people say, oh, nobody will watch YouTube. These videos will be crappy. Nobody wants to watch something on somebody's flip phone. Look at it now. I mean,
as it turns out, they were right.
They were right.
but they were right about the flip phone, not the video.
Exactly. But they said that about desktop publishing. Weimer typesetting, you mentioned that Weimer was doing hot lead, which was lead type. It was typesetting. It was the old fashioned typesetting up until about a year before I started there in '87. And it was, it was like a dinosaur. It was like Jurassic Park in there. And I had done some desktop publishing in college. I taught myself how to use a Mac. Ball State was where I went to school, and that was one of the 300 schools in the country that Steve Jobs sent a Mac to back in '87. And so I was self-taught on that, and I knew where that was going. And I thought, man, if I can figure this out, I could probably, really help this magazine industry progress. And I did. But, yeah, it's been a lot of change. So I guess my passion is I'm more creative, and I like to always come in every day with my eyes open, trying to figure out where this is going next and trying to predictively get our company prepared for that and changing for that, which is unusual for print companies. Most printing magazine publishing companies are, still wearing penny loafers and just waiting on the sales reps to bring in all those ads this afternoon. And I really just don't view things that way. I see publishing and technology as a way to democratize media. It's allowing anybody, and including me, where I can bring in a franchisee and they could be publishing a publication and we have an issue out in 9 weeks. That couldn't have happened 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah, no, it's mass customization at scale with speed.
Exactly.
It's unbelievable.
If you want to do it, that's the thing. Right. A lot of people sit back and talk about that, but they just, they don't want to ever do it. And I think publishing and that whole newspaper industry was just so slow to change. And I just saw the changes. Obviously I had a magazine publishing company and I had a .com across the hall. I mean, I've jumped in with both feet, and I'm never sorry for that.
So if you go back to 2003 and you think about the things that you didn't know, right? What things could you have done better? What could you have known that would have made it easier for you when you got started?
I think the thing that would have helped me more was just having more business experience. I have a lot of passion. I will work harder than anybody in the room, but that also gets in my way a lot of times because I don't want to listen to people. I don't want to sit in classes. Now, I dropped out of Ball State. I never finished college. I went to Ball State for 3 years and Heron Art School for a year. And I went to IUPUI continuing education for a few years, taking night classes. I've got like 140 credit hours and no degree because I just couldn't stick with it. And I think if I could go back and do it all over again, I probably would have, probably still would have went into architecture. You couldn't have talked me out of that, but I would have got into business classes, learned more accounting, how to manage people, more HR type things. That would have helped me a lot. By nature, I'm a person who likes to learn things the hard way. I like to just figure things out.
But there's no other way to learn.
Yeah. Well, I guess there is. I just never figured that.
Yeah, rumor has it.
Yeah. But I just can't. That gets you in trouble a lot of times too. And if I could do it all over again, if I was a younger version of myself, I probably would have taken some more business classes at IUPUI when I was trying to get those continuing education classes, and just got a little more structure there. But I figured it out, and luckily I married well, and I got a wife who already knew how to do that kind of stuff. So when we started Townpost in '03, she was kind of handling that side of it for me. She already knew that I had that gap, and it worked out for us. But that's, if I was talking to anybody who's looking to get started in a business and looking for any insights and they're under the age of 30, I'd just say get the education on the business side of things before you start doing a business.
It's so this is episode 110, maybe. The number one weakness that people point out, the thing that they wish they knew, was financial literacy.
Yep.
And it's without question probably the biggest Achilles heel for business owners.
It is. And here's the thing, though. I struggle with that because I think if you're an entrepreneur, you're naturally going to have that. people that sit back and worry about their business plans or want to get everything documented and buttoned up before they ever hang their shingle out usually never start businesses, or they're not good entrepreneurs. The people that go out and just say, hell with it, I'm just going to do it, I'll figure that other stuff out later, those people are the ones that usually succeed, at least in my experience.
You kind of skipped to my next question, which was, how much of a plan did you have when you went to start?
This much. If you're listening to podcasts, that's a big zero.
Yeah.
Okay. And that wasn't intentional, but again, I need to figure things out. I mean, when I started at Gaius.com back in 2003, when I launched that, okay, I was CEO of a .com company. You would think I could build a website, but guess what? I didn't know how to build a website. Right. I knew guys that could build websites, and I hired people that could build websites, but I'd never built one. So I had to spend 9 months learning a program called Dreamweaver. So if you're not a programmer, it's the equivalent of Microsoft Word for web design. Okay.
Right.
It's like the most basic web design program you can get. And I built at Gaius.com in Dreamweaver, but I had to learn about hosting and how to set up email for myself. I had to learn how to build pages, how to build navigation, hyperlinks. I had to learn code for the first time. These are all things that I just didn't know. But yeah, I'm not going to take a class in web design and then go build my website. I ain't got time for that. My patience is too short. I'm just going to go figure it out.
Right.
It served me well, but you do run into traps a lot, and but just keep plowing forward, and you don't have to worry about it.
Well, so the other consistent theme that has come out through these episodes is you really ought to have a plan. You ought to have financial resources set aside, and you ought to have a good understanding of financial reporting and the consistent answer to how many of those did you have is, well, I didn't have any. I just have heard that that's what you're supposed to have. Because I think there is, people that start businesses just start businesses, and you see an opportunity, and it's interesting and challenging, and then you start the business to figure out whether or not it can be rewarding financially.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I never started Townpost. I never started the Gaius magazine with the thought that I was going to have some franchise conglomerate of 19 publications in 2 states. That never would even cross my mind. In 2003, I was just trying to see if I could figure out a way to monetize a website, and could I publish a newsletter in my community that would at least make enough money to pay for its own postage. That was my only goal. And as I got more into it and I started doing it more and started getting more feedback from people, I started realizing I really was onto something. And that's when the passion really fired up. At first, it's just an experiment. But when you prove the experiment is a viable model, and by viable, I mean can at least pay for itself. I didn't need somebody to invest in this thing to keep it going. It was paying for itself.
So when you say pay for itself, obviously the name of the podcast is Default Profitable,
right?
Which comes from conversations I've had with these tech startups. And I'm like, what's your business plan? And they say, well, we're going to get an investor. We're going to lose all their money. Then we're going to get a bigger investor. We're going to lose all their money. By the time we lose the third investor's money, we're going to sell the company. Everybody's going to be rich. I'm like, no, that's not really how it works. Like, you got to go out and you got to make more than you spend this week. Mm-hmm. By default, you must be profitable to make it to next week.
Correct.
And it sounds like that was the business model you were pursuing.
Yes. Well, the lucky thing for me was I was doing consulting. So this was an experiment that I always wanted to do since my .com days. And there was nothing that was going to stop me from trying the experiment. I mean, I didn't need anybody else execute on this petri dish called Gaius magazine. And I think that's a secret I would tell to anybody. If you're looking to start a business, if you're relying on somebody else, or if you need to hire somebody to be the other half of your business, or if you need a big capital infusion to get started, you're probably not thinking small enough. And I try to lean towards businesses that I can do everything in. Like, this will sound, I don't know, maybe braggadocious, but there's nothing in our business that's done right now that I can't do. I'm not a good writer, but I could do it.
Right.
I can't do editing real well, but I've got AI could get me about 90% of the way there. I can't do design of pages anymore because I'm terrible at it, but I would do it. I mean, it wouldn't look as good as it does now, but I could probably get it done. So if you're in a business, if you're thinking about doing a business that you are handicapped by somebody else's skill set or knowledge and for your success, you're probably just thinking too big. Just get it down to what you can do and start there.
Yeah, that minimum viable product where you can go out, you can produce something, it can get revenue, and then you can grow.
Yeah. The guy's newsletter I did first was 6 pages.
Yeah.
6.
How big is it now?
Well, I mean, our total page count across the network is, hundreds of pages. We probably do 600-700 pages a month now, but it was 6 pages.
Right.
But, that's all I needed to prove the model. I didn't need to go out and, get a 48-page magazine out of the box first thing to prove the model.
Right.
I just need to be able to show that I could do it for, I could earn more money than I had to spend to get it out in the mailbox, and I did. I only made $200 or so, but at least I proved the model.
That's more. That's better than zero.
Exactly.
So if you could go back, if 2024 you could sit down next to 2003 you and say, hey, listen, tomorrow you're going to start the Geist newsletter. Right? It's going to be a business tomorrow. There's a million things you could do, but here's what you should focus on first. What do you focus on first?
If I was looking back on it, I would have focused on franchising right off the bat. I really struggled with franchising. I really didn't want to do it. And I fought it because if you think about a local community magazine, franchises historically have been the evil empires against small local businesses. Why did this guy go out of business? Well, this franchise moved in. Or why did this guy's chicken sandwich shop closed down? Well, Chick-fil-A opened up across the street and ran them out of business. So the paradigm that people have, the public has, and maybe the only paradigm that I had, was that franchises were evil and I didn't want to franchise. But over time, we started licensing, which is basically franchising. And we found that offering that back-end support, the services we provide our franchisees, our franchisees work from home. They don't have any overhead. They don't have to hire people. We've got everything taken care of as far as editing, publishing stuff to the site, printing, all that stuff, billing, it's all taken care of. So for those people, it's like, it's minimal for them. It's a lot for us. And if I just focused on that infrastructure and building the franchise system from the get-go, we'd probably be a little further down the road than we are with just 19 at this point. But again, that's a operational structure thing that I had to just get my head around. Then it honestly, Matt, it took me 11 years before I finally conceded to getting a franchise system set up.
Well, and if I could translate, I own a franchise, and if I could translate starting a business by having systems rather than just kind of winging it every day is a great model. And if you start a business to franchise it, you're going to start a business where the model is so clear that other people can understand it. And that's not a bad place to start.
Right. So I told you it took me 11 years to do it, to decide to do it, but it also took us 3 years to become a franchise. And it wasn't because, it is a kind of a long and arduous process to become a franchise. But the hard part was the operations manual. We had to create an operations manual so the franchisee guy could just hand them this manual and say, here's how you publish with the Townpost Network.
Right.
And so as I was writing a process, I'd say, okay, here's how we're going to do, here's how editorial's done. And I'd start typing it up. This is how we do it now. Then I realized, wait a minute, this is really archaic. This isn't the best way we could do that. So I go back and I'd investigate a better process, and we'd change the process. We test it with our licensees, and we say, yeah, that's better. And we document that, and we go on to the next phase of the business. So that 3 years took us 3 years just to really get the systems to where I felt comfortable to franchise. Yeah. And that was time well spent. To your point, it was great time spent. But if I'd spent that 3 years back in 2003, I probably wouldn't have known as much, but I probably could have shortened that runway from 11 years down to maybe 3 or 4.
Right. All right. Well, that's a quick 25 minutes. Any other tips you would offer somebody thinking about getting into business?
The only tip I would give them is just start. I think I've talked to so many people that talk about owning a business, or I've always wanted to do this, or if I only had more money, or if I had more time, I don't have time anymore to do this. I mean, just don't quit using excuses. Just go start it. Just get it going, and just prove the model first. Proving the model doesn't mean you have a lease and you've got everything figured out. Starting it's the smallest common denominator. Start small with something and just prove the model to yourself. I talked at a university a couple weeks ago, and I was telling these entrepreneur students, or seniors in college, and I told them, I said, the most rewarding point in this whole Townpost thing was not the day I sold my first franchise. It was the day that I went to the post office box and got my first checks in the mail for people that bought ads on my website back in 2003. I rented a P.O. box down in Oak Landon, and I paid $74, I think, for this P.O. box for the year. It was the smallest P.O. box they had. 36097, if you guys are wondering which one it was. And I rented this P.O. box. I didn't want people to know where I lived. I didn't want to send invoices with my home address on them. So I got this P.O. box, and I sent out my first invoice. My wife sent them out for me because obviously I can't do invoicing. But she sent out these invoices for me, and I went down there a week later and I pulled out 3 envelopes made out to the Britt Interactive at the time was our company. And I opened them up and they had checks in them for, I think it was like $180 total. And I just spent $74 on the P.O. box. And I was doing cartwheels because I made $100. And I proved the model that people would pay to be on my website.
Yes.
And that's small. I don't forget that.
Oh.
I still get emotional about it because people entrust you to help them promote their business. That's what our whole business model is about. And if people trust you enough to mail you a check on a website ad, that to me was verification I'm on the right track and this thing can work. Now, 9 months later, I started a magazine and it just blew off the doors from there. But that verification that that somebody would pay for what I'm wanting to do and what I was passionate about was just huge.
That's awesome. That is the epitome of starting a business and getting $106 more than you spent.
Yeah,
is a win.
I was doing cartwheels. I was doing cartwheels mentally, but it just fueled me to keep going and try to figure this thing out, and I would tell anybody who's looking to start a business, just start it. I had a beer with a guy about a year ago, and he's talking about this website, and he wants to do something with this website and wanting my advice on it and stuff. And I finally asked him, well, how long have you been working on this? He said 11 years. And he's never launched it. I said, dude, you're never going to launch the website.
Yeah, move on.
I'm sorry. It's been in staging for 11 years. It's never going to launch. Why are we why are we sitting here right now?
Yeah.
Just start it. I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to prove that it doesn't work. Or best case scenario, you'll find out way it can work.
Yep.
And then you'll run with it. But don't just sit there and think about stuff. Nobody's going to pay you for an idea. They're going to pay you for a business. So build the business and then cash it out someday.
Man, that's a great place to wrap up.
Yeah. Sorry, I can talk about this stuff all day, but
but that's the message, though.
It
right?
is.
Just go do
It
something.
is.
You can't steer a parked car.
Right. And don't use an excuse of my kids are taking all my time. I'm involved in different things. I don't know how to do sales. Whatever your excuse is, okay, live with that. That's fine.
Figure it out.
But I didn't know how to build websites. I didn't know how to sell print advertising. I never sold print advertising. I'd done the publishing side of things. I didn't know that side of it.
Right.
I figured it out.
Yeah.
And you will too. And just whatever it is you're looking to do, just figure it out.
All right. Well, as we wrap up, anybody that wants to learn more about Tom, you can find information on him on the show notes. 3 ways, if you're listening this long, you can help the podcast. You can leave a review wherever you're listening, hit subscribe wherever you listen, or you get an episode like this that you like, share it with somebody else. Tom, thanks for being a guest. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for giving me your platform to tell my story. I really appreciate that.
No problem. And for those listening, we'll be back next week with another episode of Default Profitable. Until then, keep working, stay focused, stay profitable.